Hey, today we finish up the full Mando armor build, and it's scary, and it's awesome. Let's go. Hey, how's it going? Anthony Ferraro here at Great Sci-Fi, trying to stay in the frame. Got the big guy here. We finally finished the full armor build. Me. And it's been an awesome project. And the first thing I want to say is, you know, what I said right at the beginning is, with things like this, you just do it one little piece at a time, and eventually it's that day when it's done. That was probably a month and a half, 2 months ago. Now it's done, right? So it's doable. Take your time. All right, so you can watch the first video to see the setup, second video to see the progress, and then we're gonna get right into finishing this up. All right, let's dive in. All right, so straight into the printer, right? So I have the resin cast thighs, right? But they're too much like the TV show. So what I did, because I had the 3D files, is I took the left thigh and I mirrored it and I made two of those, right? Because the other one with the damage built into it, it looked too much like the TV show one, so I wanted these to look more unique to this character that I'm building. So because of my print bed size, what I had to do here is print it into two pieces. You know, a little more work, but not a big deal. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to super glue these together, and the reason I'm using super glue is because I'm also going to fiberglass them. If I was only going to glue them, I would go with a 5-minute epoxy. But here, just trying to line it up, trying to not catch my beard in the glue, which does happen. And now for quick and easy, instead of Bondo, I'm doing the old baking soda technique. What that is you use a little bit of super glue, and then you rub the baking soda into it, and it kind of makes like a quick filler, like a quick Bondo. The way most people do this is they mix it together, then put it in. For some reason, this works better for me. It's probably a little more sanding than the other method, but you know, it's like what works for you. This is what works for me. And I get that dialed in, and now I'm sanding. And again, you know, I mention this all the time. My character is very, very beat up. It's heavily damaged. So even though I get this smooth, you know, I don't have to get it perfect, right? But I got it pretty close. So now, just to be safe, I'm going to put a coat of fiberglass on the back of these. Again, if this was cosplay, I probably wouldn't bother with this, but this is a film prop, and I'm only probably using it for one day, or film costume rather, but it's a lot of money to shoot, a lot of people working. You don't want to stop the day because the thigh broke, right? So first thing I'm going to do is put a coat of resin on the bottom here. My shop is very ventilated right now. I got the door open with a fan, and I'm wearing a respirator. So here, you know, I've done it in strips before because that's always the way I see people do it. But I found for me, I just kind of prefer cutting a sheet to size and then laying that in there. Maybe there's something about weaving multiple strips that probably makes it stronger. I don't know, but for this, I thought that was fine. So here, I got this curing. You see there, I marked the sides so I didn't mix them up. And then now I'm just, you know, trimming off all the edges because, you know, we're gonna sand this down. But, you know, want to get it all trimmed up first to, you know, make it a little less work, right? So now I have that trimmed, and now I'm just going with my Dremel with the sanding drum and just cleaning up those edges, right? Keep things tidy, keep things nice. We're in the zone, just making stuff, right? I'm a couple weeks into this build. Just keep the train rolling, right? And that looks pretty good. And the fiberglass also makes them feel a little more substantial. So now the weathering. Now, I think I mentioned this in the other video. So now that I'm into like my 4th or 5th piece of this armor, now I have a technique, right? I have sort of a system. So I do the saw, I do the files, and I do the Dremel, right? And what's interesting is that, you know, now it's sort of like, I wouldn't say on autopilot, but I've sort of figured out, I've come up with a look for my armor. So now I'm just going over this with a really heavy grit sandpaper because I want this to be rough. But because this is 3D printed, I did the same weathering that I did on the resin pieces, and I went a little too deep and started getting into the layer lines, but you know, I'll fix that. So now we're gonna hit this with a primer, and here, that's where I went too deep and exposed sort of the infill. but that's fine because this is all chewed up, but I'm just putting the super glue there just to make sure that it's a little more sturdy, right? So now this is the sandable primer, sanding this down because this is sort of the base coat before we go ahead and start to treat it. I always do a pass with steel wool. Really fine steel wool. To me, that is just in case I miss something, I feel the steel wool hits that. So this is the red. This is what we've been doing as sort of the undercoat where, you know, this armor's probably been painted 2 or 3 times. You know, the character's probably been in a few different groups and moved on and had to hide his identity. So what I do here is I put a base of red, and then this is the toothpaste technique, right? So we're just going to put a little bit of toothpaste on here that's going to give the chipped off look, right? And then this is the same treatment that I've done to the chest, that I've done to the shoulders, right? So that I've done to the gauntlets. It's all starting to become one character. And then now I'm putting the matte black on there, and then there you go. And you can kind of see there in the light those bubbles of toothpaste, right? So now what I've done is I always let this dry for 24 hours because what I found is then I can get really aggressive with scraping off this paint and really get that chipped look. If you rush this, you're going to end up just scraping off all the paint. And, you know, ask me how I know that. So now I'm just cleaning it up. And again, you know, broken record, creating, you know, weathered pieces is kind of your friend because, you know, certain things that would have been a mistake on a pristine piece, you just lean into them for this, and it's just, it fits, matches what you're doing, right? So now I'm going to do this with the silver dry brush to match everything else. And I call this a dry brush. It's a little heavier than a dry brush. A dry brush would be if you just kiss it, right? This I'm doing a layer of paint, but a thin, sort of streaky layer, right? Dry brush would not be this much paint, and I always just say dry brush because the brush technically is dry, but dry brush would be you're just kissing the edges, right? So this is just like a light coat. So we're gonna hit this with clear, and you know, I think you've noticed if you watch the channel, always pretty much every major pass you seal it with a clear coat, right? So you can build. So here what I'm doing is I'm masking this off, and like the shoulder bells, if you recall back to the first part of this series, what I do here is I'm gonna hit it with a gloss black, and then I'm gonna hit it with a graphite powder, and it's just gonna give like a nice little detail to the armor, right? And for this, I just use this cheap 99-cent black that I get from Home Depot, right? Because then I'm able to do this later in the day, just, you know, let that dry, hit it with a hair dryer, and boom, off to the races. Now that's a really sort of mirror finish, which is gonna get toned down when I weather it, but it tells a story, right? All these layers, I think what I'm learning, all right, so now getting ahead of myself. So I'm gonna barge cement some foam rubber on the back of these, right? Just to make them more substantial, more comfortable for the actor, and just make it more of a finished piece, right? It's like putting the bow on it, the wrapping paper. But what I wanted to say before is a lot of time with weathering, I noticed that people, they get too proud of it. They want to show off like, look how cool this weathering looks. And that always is a bad idea. What you want it to be is unnoticeable, right? I went through all that trouble to put that chrome stripe on there, and then you see it as I'm doing it, it looks really good, but I'm gonna get rid of 90% of that. But you have to be willing to make those sacrifices, and a lot of people aren't, but trust me, it makes it look better, right? So now we have this foam on the back here. Again, you know, totally unnecessary, but you know, my feeling about this is we want it to be professional, right? We want it to have substance, right? So now when the actor goes to strap these on, it feels like armor. It doesn't feel like a piece of plastic 3D printed, right? This gives it heft, it gives it sort of authority, right? So now I'm taking the heat gun. This is not a hairdryer, this is a heat gun. And what this does is it closes the pores in the foam, and then the fuzzy edges, because my knife was a little dull, it cleans up those edges, it makes everything tight, right? So now we're gonna weather it. We got the water-based oil paints, and this is the same process as the rest of the armor, right? Now we're on the assembly line, and we're making a whole suit of armor, right? Like that's why this is 3 episodes. You know, we make a blaster, we make a helmet, that's like a thing. This is, you know, I've been working on this for almost, at this point, maybe 2 months, right? So we do the black wash, that's the grease, remember? Then we do more of a dry with the burnt sienna, burnt umber, it just like doing little dabs. And then here is the green metallic. This is my sort of secret sauce. Makes no sense why I put this on here, but when I take off like 83% of it, it leaves this nice residue, this nice shadow, right? That just breaks it up. And again, you're not going to stare at it like we are here. It's just going to, when it's on the camera lens, will just make it come to life. So now we have to deal with these pants. So these were the cheap costume pants, but the soft pants, you know, these are great. So because I said I did the 2 left thighs and made one right, I just am going to have to adjust this piece. And I could have taken these right off, these sort of vinyl fake armor pieces, but I felt like this vinyl was a little more substantial for putting my Velcro on to attach these thigh pieces of armor. I just needed to adjust this one, right? So here I cut it off, and then off camera, I just did as you can see why I did it off camera, a very sketchy sewing job. But now I have sort of this nice tight base to mount these onto, right? So I'm going to do this with Velcro. And again, 3 strips I'm going to use. Probably could have got away with 2, maybe even just 1, but broke a record time. This is not cosplay. This is running around on set. Time is money. So I want to make sure these are going nowhere. And what I've been doing all along with this build with the Velcro is I'll tack it down with the sticky side, but I reinforce it with some E6000 glue, right? So I put a bead of that on there, stick it down, and the E6000 is really not going to go anywhere, right? That's what really makes this like a solid seal. The tacky is pretty good, but you know, it's not foolproof, where adding the E6000 is what's foolproof. So here I put the, I put a little bit of masking tape on the Velcro so that it wasn't a tight bond, so I could literally have this in the exact spot to put the mate, right? So now I just mark where it is, and you see there I got the E6000. I didn't do the usual show it off in the camera, but yeah, E6000, that stuff is no joke, right? So you put that there. This stuff takes like 24 hours to cure, but I know that it's not going anywhere, right? And this I don't have to clamp because, you know, you still have the tackiness of the self-stick Velcro that's helping you out, right? So there's there. And then back to the theory of wanting to make things look professional. This is another one of those extra steps, but like, you know, we're going for it with this project, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm just masking this off. And what I want to do is I want to hit this with a coat of Plastidip, right? And then the idea here is like, let's say, you know, I was shooting the film and the thigh piece came off. You might be able to keep that shot because underneath it will look like this is how this armor actually attaches instead of like a brown piece of pleather, right? I don't think that would come to that, but you know, you want to do the layers, right? It's all about the details. And speaking of the details, now I'm doing a dry brush of just some sort of pigments here. And I do the brown and I do the slate gray, which is the same that we did on the armor. And there you see, you know, that's where it's drying. And then here's the finished piece, right? Looks good. Happy with those. And then still, this cloak has been out there for, I don't know, about 2 weeks now. So I'm just letting it weather organically. So now I'm doing the shins, and I'm just going to speed this up. So the shins in part 2, I do the bracers. This is the exact same thing that I did on those. And then when I paint these, it's the same paint treatment that I just showed you just now for the thigh pieces. It's the same paint treatment that I did on the shoulders, everything, right? So there's the base piece. I got those set, and you know, it's gonna be the same thing, right? And then this one, I custom made that top piece, but I 3D print that, and you know, it is what it is, but same thing. But this is the part that I think will interest you. So I just 3D printed this little greebly. So on the back of the shin plates, there was nothing, right? Because it was supposed to be, the shins are, those are 2 pieces for 1 leg. And what I did is I split them open and then I used it for each left and right leg, right? So what that does is makes it more, you know, original than the TV show one, but now I have to put something on the calf, on the back, to be able to clamshell these together, and just so that if we see the character from behind, there should be something there. So these I'm making from scratch. I'm making these from styrene. You know, I 3D printed the greebly, but the part, so this is styrene plastic. You know, I've used that a few times on the channel. It's really great material to work with. You can just cut it, you know, with an X-Acto knife, and then bending it with just a little heat. So there's the greebly that I 3D printed, right? And that you can even build on it out of styrene, but I just wanted to do something quick, and you know me, I always like to sneak in the universal greebly. So here I'm just sanding down the corners so that they're not sharp edges. I want them to be rounded, right? So these are the back calf pieces. So now I have the lines marked where I want to bend them, right? So I'm going to heat this up, and then I'm going to use just, that's a piece of wood that I had laying around. I use that as like a painting rack, and I'm going to bend it on that line just so that my bends stay straight. And again, you know, broken record, you know, I want to get this straight, but again, this is not like a factory piece. This is going to be all like sort of weathered and beat up. So now I have that shape. And then I just remember in some documentary with the actor with C-3PO, he was saying how it would jam into his ankle. So with that in mind, I bend that out there just so that, you know, it doesn't jam into the actor's ankle. So now we're sanding this, right? This back piece. And I'm toothing it up because I'm going to be gluing that piece on there. So this is with a really heavy grit sandpaper just to give that something to lock in, right? So there's that greebly piece. And then, you know, that's just some basic shapes that I found in the program. It's just, you know, maybe some kind of heat sink or something. And then here I'm just smoothing everything out. You know, I don't know. I just like to knock off the edges basically. And then here I'm doing some basic weathering. Again, you know, we have our system now. Saw, Dremel, file, repeat. And I'm kind of in the zone with it at this point, right? It's been a few weeks. I know what I'm doing. And this is hot glue. It's super glue because the hot glue is what's really going to hold it. The super glue is just so I can keep the train rolling and keep working on this, right? So now I have these back pieces, and these are like, you know, so if you go to video 2 where I did the bracers, this is what I make the clamshell out of so that it'll fit around the leg, right? And again, you know, like I said, I'm putting on the foam rubber on the backs of these, just like I just did on the thighs, just like I did earlier on the bracers, right? And then here's the finished pieces. You can see those match the bracers like exactly, right? So that's why I didn't want to repeat that, but there, you know, just to see this is that system really paying off, because I just did the same exact thing that I did in part 2 to the legs, right? So now it's a whole piece. So now, off camera, I dyed my suit black, right? So the Mandalorian TV show undersuit is like a gray, like a slate gray color. So to further change that, I wanted to make mine black. So I dyed it black off camera. But what I'm doing here is, I always do this when I make film costumes. So what I'm doing here is I'm just spraying specks of acrylic paint just to give it a little bit of excitement, right? Just to make it look like alive. Now, I always say, like, when you look at it in video, in daylight, you know, just flat like this, it looks a little weird. But once I have that anamorphic lens and I'm shooting outside and I do a heavy color correction, it really brings it all to life. So here, I'm making bullets. And this is one of those things where I thought, yeah, all right, I bought a bandolier on Amazon that had 50 shotgun shells, right? And I thought, oh, this will be perfect. And here I print out 50 of these shells. I custom made a Mandalorian shell, and then I sized it so it would fit in the shotgun bandolier. Now here I sanded it by hand. That took forever. So then I went to my power sander. I thought that would be easier, but then what it did, it melted them. And then now I had to sort of clean them all up. So basically, The most simplest looking thing in this whole build, the whole entire build, soup to nuts, this was the biggest pain in the butt, and this took me the longest. And it was one of those things like, once I committed to it, it was like, oh, geez, what was I thinking? Making 50 of these was, it wasn't fun. But, you know, look at that. Like, that was just like, oh my God, I had to sand all those, right? And then I had to prime them all. And then I had to paint them all. And then when I'm going to put them all into bandolier. And then off camera, I realized that they needed a little more of a treatment, and I just, once you get in that point, you don't worry about filming stuff. You're just like, oh, geez. So this was the most difficult thing that I did. Here I'm hitting them with a graphite powder. Now it's like one by one, gonna polish them, and it's just like, oh, geez. Like this was definitely like 72 hours of my life that I'll never get back. But was it worth it? Yeah, it was worth it. Because once I put it all together, this was pretty crazy. So here's that bandolier I bought on Amazon. I didn't show this because I just bought it. The only thing I did is I 3D printed a little greebly to put at the bottom just to tie it in. But, this is just bought from Amazon. I can put a link to this if people want to see what it is. It's just a 50 shell bandolier. So here they all, and like I said, all right, then I was like, okay, this is worth it. This is pretty cool. And then when I put it on there, it's like, yeah. And again, off camera, sorry, this build was getting so long. I just removed a couple, like tore them out because I figured that would look more authentic. All right, so now Mr. Core Geek. This guy's a great maker. You should follow him. I got one of his helmets. I got this a long time ago and I've been waiting. Now, I was apprehensive. Now this is it. This is the cherry on the cake. He sanded these beautifully, right? So they were good to go. The only thing I had to do is remove sort of this spacer that when he cast them, held the place of where the visor is going to go, right? And it was just like, this helmet was, it wasn't cheap because this is, just professional grade piece right here. So, it looks like I'm just buzzing right through that, stuff's flying through, but believe me, in my head, I'm just like, be very careful, be very careful. I'm speeding up this video now, but I was taking my time. And, I definitely have a respirator on during this. I even had to change out like a new filter. So then once I get that out of there, what was lucky, then, this is well designed and Core Geek did such a good job. Once I had to clean that up, the design was such that, the hard edge, that sort of defining line is built into the model. So all the cleanup I had to do was behind it. So now the hardest thing that I had to do, and this was very hard, it's coming up, not yet. So here, what I'm doing here is there's these little earpieces that are separate that need to be glued on. So when I do my paint treatment, I want to keep this virgin, right? I don't want to get paint on here because I want to glue plastic or, the resin to the resin. And also off camera, the earpieces, I paint and weather, do everything exactly what I'm doing here. I just didn't show that. So now the weathering, like I said, this was a gorgeous, pristine helmet. And to start doing this battle damage, it took me a second, right? It was standing on the cliff's edge. But then when I jumped. And then now it's like, okay, no turning back. And it's like, yeah. Then I just started really getting into it. And like I said, this helmet was so well made that it was like, it was really fun to do the damage because you didn't worry that you were going to actually damage the helmet because it's so well made. And I was really leaning into these dings. And that's why I'm glad I saved this to last, because I really knew how far I could go by now. And I had my system dialed in. I wouldn't have had practiced on the helmet, right? So now, right, you know what we're doing now, right? And then hopefully, this is sticking in your head now. It's like, okay, doing this red, and you notice I didn't paint the whole thing red because, I'm only going to do little bits and bobs of the toothpaste. So, I didn't want to go crazy with the red, and, it takes longer to dry, and, at this point, you're in the home stretch. It's like you just want to get done. So there's that big hit on the side of the head there. That like spidered out one. No idea what that's from, but it tells a story, right? So then there's the toothpaste on there. Now I'm going to hit it with my flat matte black, the Rust-Oleum, that wheel paint that I love. Like I said, I usually use a hairdryer, but lately I've been just using a fan, and something about blowing a fan on it just seems to make it dry harder and quicker. And again, this was overnight, and sorry about the white balance in this shot. Something was going kooky with my camera. I ended up swapping it out later. And basically, you start to see it come to life. And you can't tell because, the way that I edit these, I speed it up. But I go over it and over it again and then triple check, because you're always going to miss a little bubble of toothpaste, I found. So you just want to check and check and check. So then here's the dry brush treatment. Same treatment. That is on everything else, right? So hitting it with that. And again, not dry brush, light brush. A light coat with a dry brush. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But what's interesting about this is, you can see this is not anything like the Best Cars steel at all. But in certain light, when I take the beauty shots, it's it almost looks like it's just beat up Best Car. It's really interesting. That does not. And then, had a sunny day, having a few of those. It's getting into winter, but whenever I can take advantage, I put it back there. It dries quicker. And then now the wash, right? So the water-based oil paints, the black. This is the grease. This is the grime, right? This is the whole sludge that we put over the whole thing. Then I pat it off with a paper towel. Then with the burnt umber, the burnt sienna. Then I do the stabbies. And then the green, the special sauce, the secret spice, the metallic green. And honestly, when I did the first piece, what was it, the chest? I just grabbed that metallic green, was like, oh, let me see. And then this stuck throughout the whole build, right? So you got to be open to little improvisation, right? So that ended up being my favorite little touch on there, right? So now I'm doing some bloody fingers. This guy's been in a lot of battles. He's got a bloody hand, adjusting his helmet. But this was probably years ago, so we're going to wipe it all off. But maybe there's little hints, little shadows of red from that day 5 years ago when he had the bloody hand, right? And, it's in tiny, tiny degrees, all this stuff. But I don't know. I've just learned over the years, it just really pays off. These just little tiny, unnoticeable little bits and bobs. So here I got the 5-minute epoxy. What I'm doing here is I'm just making some channels, some grooves, really scratching this up, toothing it up, so that the epoxy has somewhere to go, and that I know that these are going to be in there for the long haul. There's a never coming off. They'll break off. And I've been getting these single-use epoxies lately, but it seems wasteful. So I'm going to invest. I always see people using the big jars of it. So there's the helmet, right? Giving it the once over, checking it out. Yeah. So now we got to make it comfortable on the inside, right? So we've been doing it on the inside of the thighs and the gauntlets and the legs. So certainly we're going to do it on the helmet. So the first thing I'm going to do is this face shield. I'm just going to make a template of it because I want to see how far I need to sand. I want to have sort of a placeholder for where I'm going to put my glue. And then the foam that I'm going to line the inside in, I want to make sure there's enough room to glue this down and not have it interfere, right? So this is from a welding shield, and you buy those on Amazon, and it's what's recommended. In my other helmet, in my first helmet build video, I bought a shield made by a maker that was really cool. But I tell you, these welding shields, they really do a nice job. You can see through them very clearly, and nobody can see back through the other side, right? So here I took some masking tape on the inside of the helmet, and I just made these patterns. They're just sort of, I eyeballed them, but it's just kind of like what I imagined was just a nice clean shape. So this is going to go on the cheek, right? So instead, so the actor's face is not hitting up against the painted plastic. And the same thing, this is going to go in the back. And all this really does is it just tidies it up. You know what I mean? Could you wear the helmet without this? Absolutely. But I don't know. I just think it's worth it. Here I'm just rounding the corners, just again, so when you look in there, looks like something's going on. It looks more like, a space helmet, motorcycle helmet, than than a piece of cast plastic that's like a toy. So here, you know, you put a coat on both sides, you let it dry for about 10-15 minutes till it gets tacky. Then you put that in there, and then that is not going anywhere. And the barge, again, I got the respirator on, ventilated. I don't tend to do the respirator, like stop everything and show you, but I mean, I maybe should do that, but just, yeah, you really got to wear a respirator when you're doing this stuff. All right, so now I have my shield sort of masked out because I want to put Velcro to put like foam furniture cushion in here so it's really soft on the head, and then I'm going to do like a coat like I did on the legs. I'm going to do a coat of Plastidip black just to, again, just make it nice in there. So I want to keep that pristine where that visor is going to go, so that way when I put the glue on there, it's going to glue to the plastic, not to paint. So what I'm doing here is I'm just masking off the helmet because I'm going to paint the inside with the Plastidip. And again, guess what I'm going to say? Not necessary, just making it nice for the actor, right? Especially the helmet, right? So the actor is in the costume. They suited up. They're getting ready to go on set, right? Getting ready to do their role. That's the last thing they're going to look at is that inside of their helmet. And when they're putting that on, you know, if it looks like something real in there, they're like ready to do their business. If it just looks like, you know, pieces of chewed up plastic, you know, it's fake, right? So here I got the Velcro in there, and I want to put in like furniture foam, but before we do that, now we're going to put in a visor, right? So, and you get an idea there of how you see through the visor. And this, I'm doing, you know, it's hard to tell, and you could typically tell on the channel when something is a little like sort of, you know, testy or iffy, is because you can't see me do it, because I'm not worried about if the camera can see me. I'm more concerned about getting it in there. So this was clearly not as fast as it happened just there. I tacked in the corners, waited for them to dry, then put, you know, like strips along, waited for that to dry. So that whole thing probably took like 20 minutes. But yeah, that's one thing to notice on my channel. If all of a sudden I'm doing something and you can't see it, it's not a good camera angle. That means I'm so focused on doing whatever that task is, and it could screw up at any second, that I forego making the camera angle better. So here, same thing, strip of hot glue, and then the self-adhesive, right? So it's doubling down. And these are just strips of like furniture foam. Like I get these from the hobby store. And here, you know, sorry this is overexposed, but this is all black in there. You want to be able to see the inside of the helmet. But you can see how nice and cushy that is, right? So with the powders, final, same thing as the shoulders, same thing as the thighs, as the chest. You know, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, you know, my short film is going to take place in the desert, so I want everything dusty. And same thing too, it would be weird if this visor was just, you know, like a squeaky clean window when I rest is beat up. So, I mean, obviously it's not going to look like that, but I just wanted to have like a little bit of dust in the corners where, like, yeah, of course he cleans it off, but like in the corners there's a little bit of dirt, a little bit of grime. So now I go over it lightly with a little bit of the slate black. Primarily I did the brown, then the black, and then I just take a dry brush, a literal dry brush, and it just sort of wipe the majority of this off. But it gives it, you know, when I look at my pieces without that sort of dusting on there, it definitely adds something, right? So then that's my poor man's air. I'm just using my shop vac backwards, blowing stuff off. And then the blue, I just do the blue like I did the metallic green. I just hit little random spots. It just sort of gives it a little bit of life, right? It's not going to pop as much as you see it popping there. But yeah, looks good, right? All right, so I think that is it. Whoa! Finally, the beauty shots. Yeah, it's. I gotta tell you, having this in the shop, once I finish the helmet, it's a little intimidating. Like, it feels like there's somebody and they're like looking at me, right? Like, this is such a well-designed costume. Like, it really speaks volumes of how powerful this is, just having this in the corner of my shop. I mean, look, like that, I don't know, I'm really, really happy with that. And it, you know, it's very intimidating in a great way. This came out so good, right? So the Corgi helmet, the Nigel with the armor, right? My bits and bobs, some 3D printing. So excited. And again, you know, this is my lockdown project. I'm doing a Star Wars fan film, Mandalorian themed, right? So, man, it's just so much, right? But like I said at the top, it's like, this was a lot of work, right? But I just sort of looked at it one piece at a time. You know, these we did months and months ago, added, you know, this bought online, but treated it, and just, the soft costume, dyed it black, so it's our own original one. Just so much going on, but one day at a time, totally doable. Well, we got more Star Wars builds coming. I'm doing a Twi'lek costume. That's coming up. I did the Jedi, so those are going to be my main characters. I'm making a custom weapon for this, right? So I'm doing a mashup of a few Mandalorian-inspired weapons because I want this character to have his own, like, Dirty Harry style, like, just obnoxiously dangerous weapon, right? And that'll probably be in a couple weeks. So, as always, I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Love to read the comments. And be sure to check out the merch shop. We got the hats, got the shirts. What am I wearing today? Today's Punished Props, right? Great channel over there, Bill Duran. Practicing what I preach. Buying the merch really helps these channels. Well, that's all for me on the Mando armor build. Still more Mandalorian Star Wars stuff to come. And just remember, I'm just here to help make sci-fi.